I share this to warn everyone the long requested video about my experience with demon possession when I lived in Thailand. A lot of people have been wanting me to tell that story for years and years and years.
What if I made up my mind to rely on you? I thought I wanted it easy, but easy never needed you.
Hey guys, it's Lizzie. Today I'm going to answer the question, is bipolar disorder demon possession? I actually get this thrown at me a lot where people are saying that I'm demon possessed when I'm in manic episodes, and even people with really good intentions will say that instead of going on medicine, I should go to an exorcist or pray to God and that will heal my bipolar disorder. The majority of these comments are infuriating to me because I'm a huge proponent of being medicated for any mental illness, and I might not be alive right now if it were not for medicating myself over the past few years. I think there is something to say though with connecting mental illness to spiritual warfare, just because anything tearing you away from God, anything chaotic in the world, anything that happened because of the fall that should not be part of creation is connected to spiritual warfare, even if it's in a vague, indirect way. I think that Western culture tends to separate medical from spiritual, science from religion. We tend to think that the two cannot be connected. I also am going to share the long requested video about my experience with demon possession when I lived in Thailand. A lot of people have been wanting me to tell that story for years and years and years, so it very much connects to this video. I'm finally going to share it. Before we get into the video, I wanted to shout out the sponsor for today's video, BetterHelp Online. They are an online therapy service. So if you have bipolar disorder or any mental illness, or think that you might have a mental illness and need to be diagnosed, these are licensed therapists, licensed psychologists, and it is online therapy, online mental health treatment. So if you cannot get off work to make it to an appointment, or you're in such bad depression and don't want to leave your house, this is the perfect option for mental health treatment. I've gone to therapy so many times. It's been the most important thing for helping me understand my bipolar and how to live with my mental illness. So even if you've been diagnosed for years and have been on medication for a long time, it's always important to go to therapy and really understand yourself better and how to manage your diagnosis. I'm a huge proponent of therapy. I'm a huge proponent of medical treatment. So definitely think about making an account through BetterHelp Online. You do not even have to have health insurance to use the app. I know a lot of people cannot access mental health treatment because you don't have good health insurance, so this is a great option. It's going to be linked below. Make sure to use my affiliate link below. Thank you so much for supporting this company. Through supporting the company, you are supporting my channel. So let's get into the video. Mental illness, demon possession. So in scripture, there are times when Jesus is giving an exorcism, calling out a demon. There are a couple times where it's very clear to me that it is schizophrenia. This story in particular, Matthew 8:28 through 34, Jesus is casting out a demon in this man. You guys probably know the story. The guy is self-harming, running around, something is wrong with him. Jesus calls out the demons, then he allows them to go into this giant herd of pigs, and then the pigs all run down the hill into a lake and kill themselves. So this story, the way the man is described, makes it look like it's some kind of mental illness. There are other stories of demon possession, and it seems like the person may have just had seizures. So during the Bible times, they didn't fully understand different medical problems. And so it was called demon possession, when now we could say, oh, it is this person having seizures. It is schizophrenia. It is bipolar. The types of demons and exorcisms that we deal with today, I know in the Catholic Church, every single diocese has an official exorcist who goes to school and knows what prayers to pray, what to say to the demon inside a person for the exorcism. So this is a real thing where demons still exist, and many of the things that back then they thought were demons, today we realize it has a physical brain medical cause that can be fixed with medication. But that does not lessen the amount of spiritual warfare involved. But even when we're dealing with any medical problem today, if someone has cancer, absolutely, we want to give them the absolute best medical treatment, the best drugs, the best chemotherapy, the best doctors, the most detailed diagnosis, the best diet to help fight against that medical condition. But at the same time, everyone at the church is praying so intensely for the person to be healed. And there are so many times in medicine when someone is mysteriously, miraculously cured, and even doctors who are non-religious acknowledge that there are situations where they clearly see cancer in someone, and then everyone at the church is praying, and then it goes away. There are so many mysterious things that happen. We should not at all create a dichotomy between physical health problems and praying for someone. But I think the issue comes in when we completely reject medical science, we completely reject physical treatment, doctors, which the Catholic Church actually created hospitals and modern medicine and genetics and evolution, all of that. Specifically Catholics, our tradition has never created a dichotomy between the spiritual world and medical science. We've never had a problem with them going together. But the issue with people saying that I'm demon possessed, or telling anyone with a mental illness that they're demon possessed, or it's spiritual warfare, or something is happening on a spiritual level, is when you're saying this is the only thing that is happening and you should stop doing any kind of medical treatment, stop being on medication, and only deal with it or think about it as a spiritual problem. The two always go together, but I find that with mental illness, a lot of times, because it's in the brain and it's a relatively new science, people tend to think of it as less legit than if someone had heart disease or type 2 diabetes or cancer, just because it's happening physically in the brain. And people tend to think of things in the brain as like an immaterial mind, when really we can see the physical things happening in the brain. Does that make sense? With mental illness in particular, we have a tendency to over-spiritualize it. That being said, I absolutely think that mental illness is spiritual warfare, and I wouldn't say straight up demon possession, because I think that is a really serious thing. But I will say I think dark forces are involved in mental illness, and I'll give you a few examples. So when I was in college, my junior and senior year, when my severe depression episode was happening, I would have hallucinations, auditory hallucinations in my head of a voice other than my own telling me, kill yourself, jump off, kill yourself. And I think people who haven't been in a situation when they've heard a voice or heard a hallucination, you don't understand what I mean. But in that situation, I could clearly tell it was not a thought. It was not my own thought. It was something outside of myself, and it was a voice telling me that. So, of course, we can explain this as a classic symptom of bipolar disorder, psychosis. All of these things can be explained from a physical level, but it is absurd and crazy for anyone to say in that situation that it also isn't spiritual warfare. Something inside me, a voice in my head telling me to kill myself. It also has a spiritual cause. I almost think of mental illness as a weakening of the separation between dark forces and yourself. It's more porous, and I think that those dark forces are more easily able to come into someone who's in a state like that. And so absolutely, you can explain it perfectly through mental illness, but also I think of it as spiritual warfare. I promise I'll go into the demon possession full out story really soon. Another point is that when I was in depression, I almost left my faith. I couldn't understand how a God could put people through mental illness and war and rape, shootings, extreme hunger and disease to innocent people. It was so hard for me after being in a major depressive episode for 8 or 9 months, not feeling God the entire time, and then thinking of the problem of evil, everything that was happening the summer of 2016 with the Orlando shooting and so many things happening. It was so hard for me to believe in God. I was so close to leaving my faith. I wanted to become agnostic, atheist. I didn't want to believe in God. It was too painful to believe in God. And what put me in that situation of wanting to leave my faith was being in severe depression, having a mental illness, being bipolar. It left me so susceptible to leaving the faith. And it's kind of like what I said, where it becomes more porous, the ability for the spiritual forces to invade. When I was in depression, I wasn't going to church every week. I wasn't surrounding myself as closely with scripture and a spiritual community. I was being dragged further and further away from it, to the point where I was ready to leave the faith, to the point where I was ready and needed and felt this huge desire, urge so strong to just leave God and not believe in God. It didn't make sense. Tell me that is not spiritual warfare. There's no spiritual element involved. It seems really obvious that both are true at the same time. And mental illness in particular leaves you open for stuff like that to invade. Thailand is the most spiritual country. And I do not mean in the sense of people being really dedicated to their faith, super into Buddhism. All I mean is that the amount of dark forces and demons existing in Thailand is one of the most in the world. And I know this because several of my best friends in college were from Singapore and Thailand, passionate Christians, and in non-Western countries, in Asia, Africa, South America, places that are not as infected by the Western world where we think that the spiritual realm doesn't exist at all. In these countries, Satan intervenes in more direct spiritual warfare, demon type ways than in America. Because think, in the United States, in many countries in Europe, in Canada, people believe that the spiritual realm does not exist at all. They don't think there's anything but physical matter. And so if there started being different demon possession type things happening, it would actually increase people's desire to believe in God and become a Christian. And so it's in Satan's best interest in these Western countries to not intervene in the world through these blatant spiritual ways. But people I met in my college from Southeast Asia had the craziest stories. And when you hear stories like this, they're not making it up. And it's spirits and gods that exist in gods. So not actual gods, but spirits or fake gods, deities that exist in other religions directly impacting the world. Like, I'm getting shivers, and I'm not going to tell other people's stories because they're not my stories to tell. I wasn't there. I wasn't a part of it. But the people I've talked to, the Christians I've talked to from these countries, make it clear that there are so many demonic spirits interacting with the world that are very, very real. And I remember when we were in Thailand and we would go past kind of these mini temples next to different marketplaces or stores. There'd be like mini temples, and it's for like a deity. You never, ever, ever disrespect it. They told us that. Like, don't mess with stuff because they know that it is real. And Thailand specifically has the biggest reputation for this type of stuff happening. So for those of you who are new to my channel, I lived in Thailand for a total of 6 months. So the summers after my freshman, sophomore, and junior years of college, I spent 6 weeks each summer in Thailand. I was working with a local church doing ministry. So I would be teaching English with the Bible, with the Gospel of Luke. I would sit down in one-on-one reading sessions and I would help them translate it. We would do grammar, vocabulary. I would act out the story to help them understand. We also would do group English classes, ministry retreats. We would eat a lot of meals together, play games, throw parties. It was actually the most amazing evangelism environment of my life. I absolutely loved it. But the first summer we were there, I was there 2 weeks. It kind of gives me shivers thinking about this again. So I was there for 2 weeks before the rest of my team came. So there were 5 of us total from my college who were going on this missions trip, and I went there longer. So I was there alone for 2 weeks. Towards the end of the second week, before my team was supposed to arrive, 4 different times, 4 different people showed me the same Bible verse in Philippians 4 about feeling peaceful, do not be anxious or worried about anything. My mom said it in an email. A guy I was talking to at the time, who ended up later being my boyfriend, so my ex, one of my friends from the church, and then in my apartment Bible study I was in. So all within the span of 2 days, there were all these people sending me the same exact Bible verse, Philippians 4:4-7. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your graciousness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be worried about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So this section of the Bible, people were sending me all at the same time. Nothing had really happened like that so directly, and it's just one of those situations where it's a God thing. You can just tell it's so weird and bizarre and that it's happening at the same time. So then the next day, my team arrives. Everything seems to be going well. The first week of our reading sessions were amazing. We had a huge turnout. So many people were attending church, asking so many questions about God. It was just going above and beyond everyone's expectations, amazing with the amount of interest in the gospel. That weekend, the first weekend when the whole team was there, everyone got sick except for me. And obviously in our training, they told us only drink bottled water, do not eat street food, don't eat lettuce when you're out. There are certain things you don't do so that you don't get food poisoning or get sick on a trip like this. We followed all the rules, and I'd been there for 2 weeks. There were so many Americans who came to do ministry at this church. No one got sick because they had people in charge of the Americans who would make sure that we're doing okay and we're not eating anything we shouldn't be eating. Sorry I'm talking so fast. It's just, I experienced and lived this, and it was one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me. And actually, one of my friends who was there with me is becoming Catholic on Friday. So a few days after I'm filming this, she's coming to the Catholic Church too. We bonded over this experience. So everyone is getting sick, and it's different types of food poisoning sickness. One of the people there, so sick, not able to eat food, like pale, fever, really weak and sick. Someone else is like diarrhea and throwing up, like horrible food poisoning, even though we all ate the same thing. And then there's a guy on our team who had a demon. I don't know how else to say it, but he was acting really, really paranoid, and he thought that everyone was talking about him and plotting against him. And wait, I'll tell the mental illness component really soon. We would be in a room talking together, doing our group Bible study, and he would like stand up and storm out of the room and say like, everyone's talking about you behind my back. And he said, I'm trying to get away. I have to hide. There's a demon inside of me. I'm demon possessed. I have to get away from it. It's listening to us. He was claiming that there was literally a demon inside of him physically. And I remember like reading the Bible and praying and trying to figure out like, can I do a demon exorcism? Am I supposed to pray for this and ask God to intervene and help this team member? I didn't know what to do. I didn't even believe in spiritual warfare when I got on this trip, because the church I grew up in doesn't really talk about the Holy Spirit that much. And like I was saying, in America, we don't have as many situations of things like this happening. I feel like I don't remember as much of this as I should, because it was so long ago and it was so scary, and I blocked a lot of it out. But that night was horrible. And I remember during our Bible study that night, before this demon possession thing, while it was happening, I remember saying, the reason we are being spiritually attacked right now is because everything is going so well. And when something is spiritually going amazing and so much fruit is going to come out of it with people coming to Christ and knowing God, when something is so united and close to God and so much the car is shaking right now, when something is being so aligned with God's plan and God is working so strongly through you, that's when Satan is going to attack the most. That's how it works, because he wants to get in the way of what is about to happen. Like an example of this is every single speaking event I've ever done, something has gone wrong with the plane and I've almost not made it to the event. Every single speaking event. And it's gotten to the point where it's intentional. And actually, I have a story too about, I'll link it below and up here, but I talked about spiritual warfare when I was in Canada with Patrick Coffin and Brian Holdsworth. Everything went wrong for each of the speakers and the team at the same time, and it's just spiritual warfare is happening. And I'm not someone who's a charismatic Catholic and is saying things like this. I'm a very empirical, I don't believe in that much of the Holy Spirit type speaking in tongues stuff. That's not me at all. But there are objective situations where this type of stuff happens. So back in Thailand, we have this member on our team who is yelling at us, paranoia, also claiming there were voices inside of his head saying different things and literally trying to go into a different room, run away to try to get away from what was happening. There's so much more depth of what was happening that night, and I wish I could remember all of the details so vividly to make you guys realize how terrifying an experience that was and how blatantly clear that even to someone like me who came into that experience saying there is no spiritual warfare going on, there isn't a demonic element in the world. I was such a rationalist. I completely rejected any of that as existing. But then when it's happening in front of you, you have to believe in it. While this is happening, back in America, the boyfriend of the girl I was talking about who's becoming Catholic, her boyfriend at the time, woke up in the middle of the night and knew something was horrible that was going on with our team in Thailand. Knew something was horrible with his girlfriend at the time. He wrote down the time. Later, we converted the time zone. And right as this was happening, he woke up in the middle of the night, knew something was horribly wrong, and was praying and praying and praying because he felt so strongly that something was going wrong. I remember that night praying for everyone, and I specifically prayed that the guy who this was happening to would not remember that it happened. Would not remember the incident at all, because I could imagine if I was in this situation, it would be so scarring having this experience of a demon inside of you and scaring everyone so terribly. So a couple days later, everything simmers down, everyone heals and is doing okay physically and emotionally. I remember casually mentioning the night to the guy who this happened to, and he didn't remember it at all. He did not remember what had happened. God answered my prayer. So then we kind of got out of touch with each other, everyone who was part of the team. I stayed close with a couple of the people about a year ago, so maybe 4 or 5 years after this happened. I see an Instagram post of the guy who this happened to saying he has bipolar disorder. And I immediately text a screenshot to my friend who I'm still really close to. And she's like, oh my gosh, that totally makes sense. That explains so much of what happened that night. Because paranoia, having an experience of a demon, having that amount of porous in you where you're able to be spiritually attacked that intensely, it totally makes sense. He was having a psychotic break, a manic episode when that was happening. And actually, he was on a medicine from another trip. It was like an anti-malaria medicine or something. So he had been taking that medicine from a former trip. And then he has bipolar disorder. There were symptoms of the medicine, I remember Googling years later, where if you already have a propensity of a mental illness, it can cause some kind of psychosis reaction. It was kind of, I don't remember what medicine it was. Our whole team, except me, who God was preparing me to be peaceful. So throughout this whole thing, I am the one who is trying to comfort everyone and pray for everyone and making sure it is okay. So when my friend and I were saying, this totally makes sense, now I understand even more clearly what was happening. Can it be fully explained through bipolar disorder? No. Can it be fully explained through a demonic element? No. The mental illness component and the demonic spiritual warfare component go together. Can people, when they're in a manic episode or when they're in psychosis, think there's a demon living inside of them? Maybe. When I hear voices in my head telling me how to kill myself, that is just a classic symptom of psychosis as well, right? But there's also that spiritual warfare element going on. I remember in my world religions class in college, our professor was saying he had lived in Uganda doing missions work. And he said that every time there's a traffic accident in Uganda, the news reports what physically happened. So this guy was drunk driving. this car broke not fast enough and they crashed into each other. This pedestrian or deer, I don't know if they have deer there, this animal launched into the street and they got in a car accident. Of course, they explain the physical reason for the accident, but they also always have a spiritual reason for the car accident as well, where someone was not respecting their ancestors or someone was being disrespectful, betraying some other ancestor. They're just so connected to the spiritual realm in a way that in America we would not be, but in places like Thailand or Singapore or Uganda, they're so much more aware of the spiritual realm, and Satan has more free reign to interact in situations like that because they believe that the spiritual realm exists. And so it's in his best interest to use that as a weapon. Whereas, like I said at the beginning of the video, for us, it's more of a spiritual weapon to act like none of it exists. So I share this not just to cave and tell a dramatic story about my experience with demonic elements, one of my experiences with demonic elements in Thailand, but I share this to warn everyone, don't go the extreme rationalist way in saying that any kind of mental thing that happens doesn't have a satanic element at all. But also, don't go all to the other extreme where you talk about treating mental illness as only a spiritual problem and not something in which you need to use modern Western medicine and psychiatric medication, antidepressants, mood stabilizers, antipsychotics. Don't act like we don't need to use those medicines in solving the problem, in treating those problems. It's a both and solution, and it's a complete weakness either way to not look at both components of what is going on. So is bipolar disorder demon possession? It definitely has a demonic element to it. Anything that could kill you, that could get you to kill yourself and tear you away from your faith, from your relationship with God, from the church. Anything that has that amount of power absolutely has a demonic element to it. Things that they saw as demon possession, which now have other medical causes. It's the same thing where any physical disease that wasn't a part of the perfect world God created, but that happened after the fall. All of these things, I believe, have a slight amount of demonic influence. And I think that we definitely need to treat all of these things with so much prayer, but also with actual medical treatment. Taking medication, seeing doctors, going to therapy, it's so important to treat these things as objective medical problems as well. But something that I wish I'd done when I was in depression, when my bipolar was at its worst, I kind of saw it as I can focus on my faith later. Right now, I'm really, really sick. I just need to go to a lot of therapy. I need to be on medication. I need to be on several medications. I need to get better. I need to get out of depression. I need to get out of my brain damage from depression. I saw it as kind of like once I tackle the medical hurdle of getting better, then I can focus on my spirituality. But I was totally wrong. I was so off. As a way to heal those symptoms of my bipolar and get better, to help me with treatment compliance, I should have been praying at the time, going to church, having such good spiritual community, going to worship. I should have at the time been the absolute strongest in my faith, putting so much effort and time into that. If I'd been doing that, it also would have helped my bipolar. You need to see it as spiritual element and medical element for any of this. Again, I am going to link below BetterHelp Online, which is the sponsor of today's video. If you do have a mental illness or anything chaotic, stressful going on in your life, therapy is so amazing. I've spent hours and hours in therapy throughout my life since I was in high school, and it really helped me with my relationship with my parents, my relationship with myself, with my friends, with my boyfriend, helping me get through school, helping me get through brain damage of severe depression, understand my bipolar, how to treat myself through my bipolar, just every single aspect of everything. Therapy has been amazing in my life. So if you want to do online therapy, definitely make an account through BetterHelp Online. Click on the affiliate link. Think about supporting my channel by also supporting your mental health. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!